I'm here with Gerard Batten. He's a British politician who's been the leader of the UK Independence Party, that's UKIP, since April 2018, and a member of the European Parliament representing the European Parliamentary Constituency of London. And you have been an outspoken supporter of Tommy Robinson. What has been the intended effect of your support, and what has the actual effect been?
Right. Well, I think first of all, I'm a supporter of what Tommy Robinson's trying to achieve.
Right.
I don't necessarily agree with everything Tommy says or what how he does it and goes about it, but I do agree with the cause that he's trying to promote, which is protecting the victims of the industrialised rape gangs that we've got operating up and down this country now. The result of the support that I've been able to give him has been tremendous. I mean, you know, I did one tweet on this subject at the weekend. I've had over 1 million views on that support. There's tremendous support up and down the country for him, and from all kinds of different levels. In UKIP, we've had one of our peers, Malcolm Lord Pearson, support him and actually say that if any harm falls Tommy in prison, if he's murdered or if he's injured, then Malcolm will actually take the Home Secretary will take out a private prosecution against the Home Secretary for being an accessory or negligent in his duty. So he's got an enormous amount of support. Again, not for him in the sense of everything he is or does, but the cause that he is trying to promote. And I think that he's a very brave man. He's heroic in some ways in that he's trying to stand up to this menace in our country. And I think that he deserves support for that. However, he may have technically been guilty of contempt of court or broken the law, and I don't condone that or endorse that. That's wrong, but I think the sentence that he got was out of all proportion to what he's actually done.
Right, yeah, and I should clarify that, yeah, your support, by which I mean that you spoke at Downing Street during the protests. However, you were a little upset at the way the protests ended up, getting a little bit too rowdy.
That was outside the gates of Downing Street. We had a lot of people there. Most of it was well ordered, good humoured, and people had come there to make a point. And we got a couple of people try to storm the gates of Downing Street. You always have to wonder when these things happen at demonstrations, whether they're just hotheads in the crowd or whether they are agents provocateurs who've been put in order to discredit the demonstration. That's always the danger with these type of things.
So what can people do to show their support for Tommy? What's a good way for them to
support him? I think one of the things already, the reason that they've lifted the reporting restrictions on this case, because it was unbelievable that you couldn't even talk about it. You're not allowed, you know, what kind of country are we living in where somebody can be taken into a court, sent to prison within a few hours, and you're not allowed to report on it or say anything about the facts of the matter. So I think people's support, for example, in the social media, has actually made a difference there because the authorities realised the reporting restriction is unworkable anyway, so it's gone that far. And I think now he needs our support to ensure that he is kept safe in prison, because I don't know what it's like in America, where you're from, but over here now, a lot of our prisons are actually under the sway of Muslim gangs inside prison who convert people. There's a whole movement now in prisons called taking the mat, which means that people become nominally Muslims, become part of the structure there in order to protect their own life and limb. And our authorities don't control the life in prison anymore. I mean, the whole country's falling to pieces anyway in so many different ways, but that's just one of them, I'm afraid.
Right. So why do you think it was that this decree of silence was put on Tommy's case? Well, what do you think was the intention of the blocking?
Well, I could understand that in the very short term because the argument is that they were protecting the integrity of the trial and the judge didn't want a mistrial. Well, I'm dubious about that anyway because as I understand it, and I haven't listened to all of the 2 hours of Tommy's live feed from outside the court, but he was only actually reading out information that was already in the public domain. He, I believe, accosted a couple of the defendants as they were going into the court, which was probably unwise of him. But you've got to bear in mind that the mainstream media does that all the time. For example, we've seen famous examples of this in the Ralph Harris trial, who was convicted of paedophile activity, the famous British comedian that, you know, and entertainer that people in America may not be familiar with, an Australian, lived in Britain all his life. At the age, I think he was in his 70s, who's been convicted of this. The media was a big scrum of media, a whole crowd of media outside the court during the trial. This is fairly common in British trials. The media will talk to people I've had it myself when I was a witness in a court case. You come out of the trial, you got the media asking you your opinion. I said, well, I can't give you an opinion because the case is on. You know, I'll be in trouble with the judge if I say anything to you. But they still ask you.
Right.
So Tommy was doing nothing compared with what the mainstream media do all the time anyway. His problem was that he already had a contempt of court order against him with a suspended sentence. So he sailed too close to the wind, I think, on this, and for technical reasons he's been found guilty.
So I know there's a lot of work being done to help Tommy. What are some hopes in terms of what can be done for him at this point?
Well, that's in the hands of his lawyers, because I don't know how you can appeal. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but hopefully they will find some way of trying to appeal this sentence and get it reduced. So that's one thing. And I think the second thing is there must be a public outcry to ensure that the authorities keep him safe in prison. If you read his book, Enemy of the State, he claims that they actually tried to have him murdered in prison by making him available to Mohammedans who actually hate him enough to try and kill him, and his life was actually saved. In fact, my colleague, Lord Pearson, says that he actually interceded with the Home Office and had him moved in a prison, which saved his life.
Oh, wow.
But that's what you need. I mean, that's what you need, high profile publicity in order to do any good in these type of cases, so that the authorities are wary of what they're actually doing. And I do find it incredible. I find this very, very difficult to believe that my country, that I love so much, has now sunk so low that this kind of thing can happen in prison, that people's lives can be deliberately put in danger because the authorities don't like the line they're taking on a particular issue. And our authorities in this country, our political establishment, are surrendering, they are submitting to fundamentalist and literalist Islam.
Which, of course, the literal definition is submission.
Exactly.
And I know that somebody of authority was actually asked, you know, what about this danger that Tommy Robinson faced? And essentially they just said, hey, he knew what he was getting into, you know, let the cards fall where they may. And it's kind of a scary thing that essentially he can almost be sentenced to death in a way.
Well, I don't know who said that, but we live in a country where we haven't got the death penalty. And personally, I believe we should have for certain of the worst crimes, the worst murders. And yet somebody's prepared to do that for somebody who's convicted of what? Contempt of court, and yet they're happy to see him murdered. You'll see people on the social media rejoicing that he's in there and that he might be murdered for a contempt of court, and yet we don't hang the worst child murderers in this country. Shows you that things are getting a bit sick, really, doesn't it, when those kind of things are in the public domain. Yeah,
and speaking of that, there's been sort of recent stories about UKIP, the party that you're ahead of, supposedly moving to the right, but you take umbrage at that. You disagree with that characterization.
I do. You know, I can't say I'm amused, but let me explain something. I got into politics by accident, really, only because my country was being betrayed to the European Union and our law-making abilities and our rights of self-determination transferred to Brussels. So I actually got involved in politics, and I have spent 25 years of my life working with all my colleagues in UKIP, thousands of people, to achieve what? That we leave the European Union, that we return our lawmaking to our own parliament, that we can become a sovereign, independent, democratic country again, where we are governed by our own laws, our statute law, our common law, under parliament, from politicians that we can elect, and at the end of a 4 or 5 year term, we can unelect them and get a new government. And that makes me and my party far right. And, you know, this is quite, it's silly, really, isn't it? And the other thing that they call us far right is because we actually oppose what's happening in our country to the growth of militant Islam and the way this is encroaching more and more on our society in the process of Islamisation, where we are gradually forced to submit to more and more Islamic practices. Like, for example, so much of the meat that we now buy in supermarkets or is given out in school canteens, works canteens, is ritually slaughtered meat. Although most people would be appalled if they actually saw the animal being ritually slaughtered. But we are forced to submit.
Yeah. Well, any sort of final words of advice for supporters of Tommy in this particular time?
I believe that there is a fund being set up so that you can actually donate to his legal case. I don't actually have details of that, but I think you can find that on the internet. And I think also, if you're in Britain, write to your politicians, tell them that you're outraged at what's happened, that he must be kept safe in prison. Let the political class know that you actually care about this.
Okay, thank you very much.